Have you ever felt the weight of silence settle over you like a heavy blanket, knowing deep down that this hush is not simply the absence of noise but the gradual fading of human connection? Imagine waking up one morning after your 70th birthday and realizing that the vibrant echoes of laughter, the comforting murmur of conversation, and the reassuring presence of friends have all but vanished from your life. It might start subtly, a canceled brunch invitation, a friend who used to call weekly but now only sends a fleeting text, or a neighbor who once waved from across the yard but now barely acknowledges your existence. In these quiet moments, your mind begins to register something more profound than loneliness. It begins to change in ways you might never have imagined. When you stop socializing after 70, it's as though you have stepped onto a path that leads not just to emotional isolation but to concrete, measurable changes in your brain. These changes ripple outward, affecting your mood, your memory, your sense of purpose, and even your very cellular makeup. But here's the twist. While the path of social withdrawal can seem inevitable as you age, understanding what happens to your brain can also be the key to forging a different direction, one filled with hope, connection, and renewed vitality. Think back to a time in your life when conversation sparked a sense of aliveness in your chest. Maybe it was the thrill of meeting a new neighbor, the shared joke at a family dinner, or the animated debates with old friends over world events. Those moments were more than just fleeting joys. They were essential workouts for your brain. Every time you laughed, argued, empathized, or even disagreed, your neurons fired in dazzling patterns, forging new connections and strengthening existing ones. This constant neural activity helps keep your brain plastic, flexible, resilient, and ready to adapt to whatever life throws your way. But imagine that over weeks, months, and then years, those neural workouts begin to fade. The conversations that once bubbled up with ease become rarer, and the vibrant neural pathways you built start to relax, pruning away what they no longer need. This process, known as synaptic pruning, is a normal part of brain maintenance. Yet, when it occurs without the counterbalance of new social experiences, it can leave your mind more fragile, more prone to the creaking stiffness that often accompanies cognitive decline. It's essential to recognize that this isn't just about being alone. It's about what happens inside your skull when you withdraw from the world. When social ties wane, the parts of your brain responsible for processing emotions, interpreting social cues, and recalling shared memories begin to quiet. Regions such as the prefrontal cortex, which governs executive functions like decision-making and planning, and the hippocampus, the seat of memory consolidation, rely on social engagement as much as they rely on exercise and diet. Without regular social exercise, these regions can shrink, blood flow can diminish, and neural chemicals that promote growth and connectivity can plummet. The result? You might notice that recalling a friend's name, remembering the details of a cherished holiday, or even finding the right word in conversation becomes increasingly challenging. Picture yourself sitting in a comfortable armchair. Photographs of loved ones scattered on the table beside you. Those images evoke deep feelings, joy from wedding ceremonies, warmth from family gatherings, nostalgia from childhood vacations. But the process of engaging with those memories is a two-way street. As you reminisce, your brain is actively re-experiencing the emotions, reactivating the neural pathways that encode those moments. It's like walking through a terrain you've mapped countless times. Every step reinforces your knowledge of the landscape. Now, imagine those photographs remain untouched for years. The landscapes in your mind's eye become overgrown. The pathways you used to walk become harder to find. When you finally pick up a photo after a long absence of recollection, your brain might struggle to reconstruct the scene as vividly as it once did. It's not that the memory is gone forever. It's that the network of connection supporting it has weakened. As social withdrawal extends, the brain's reward system, its very engine of motivation, begins to sputter. You know that feeling when you're eagerly anticipating meeting a friend for coffee? Even the thought of that upcoming conversation lights up your brain's dopamine pathways, making you feel excited and motivated. But if those opportunities dwindle, the dopamine signals that once surged in expectation of social pleasure grow quiet. Over time, the brain learns that social interaction is not worth pursuing because it doesn't provide the chemical rewards it used to. Suddenly, staying home on the couch or watching television alone seems easier than risking rejection, awkwardness, or simply the effort of planning. This downward spiral can be dangerous because it creates a feedback loop. Less socializing leads to fewer dopamine hits, and fewer dopamine hits lead to less motivation to socialize. You might wonder, isn't some solitude healthy, especially as I age? Don't I deserve peace and quiet? Absolutely. Solitary moments can be precious opportunities for self-reflection, relaxation, and creativity. But prolonged isolation is a different beast. The difference lies in the balance. Humans are wired for social connection, and that wiring persists even in our later years. When that connection breaks down, it's not simply an emotional void, it's a biological one. Your brain, craving the stimulation and reward of social engagement, begins to rewire itself for isolation. Neural networks adapt to the new normal, reinforcing pathways that support withdrawal while weakening those that support connection. One of the most alarming changes is the shrinkage of the hippocampus, a critical region for memory and learning. Research has shown that older adults who experience prolonged loneliness or social isolation can have hippocampal volumes up to 14% smaller than their socially active peers. Smaller hippocampal size is strongly associated with poorer memory performance, increased risk of mild cognitive impairment, MCI, and the eventual development of Alzheimer's disease. Imagine trying to recall the name of an old friend or the details of a long-forgotten vacation, only to find your memory slips as though someone snatched away the pages of a personal diary. That diary represents your life experiences. It is your identity. When the hippocampus shrinks, those pages fade, and fragments of your identity can feel like they are slipping into a fog. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the brain's CEO, also bears the brunt of isolation. This region is essential for maintaining attention, making decisions, regulating emotions, and planning future actions. Studies reveal that socially isolated seniors display reduced prefrontal activity and diminished gray matter density in this area compared to those who remain connected. This atrophy can manifest as difficulty concentrating, impaired judgment, increased impulsivity, and mood swings. You might find yourself feeling more irritable, more prone to anxiety, or more anxious about everyday decisions. Should you go to the grocery store today, or should tomorrow be better? The ordinary decisions that once felt effortless suddenly feel like mountains to climb, largely because the brain regions responsible for guiding those decisions have weakened. Let's delve deeper into neurotransmitters, the brain's chemical messengers that also take a hit when you stop socializing. One of the key players here is oxytocin, the so-called love hormone. When you hug a friend, share a deep conversation, or simply make eye contact, oxytocin surges, reinforcing bonds and reducing stress. In older adults who maintain robust social connections, baseline oxytocin levels tend to be higher, helping to buffer against anxiety and depression. But when social touch and meaningful conversation disappear, oxytocin production dwindles. Without regular doses of this social glue, feelings of mistrust, fear, and loneliness can intensify. Cortisol, the stress hormone, often rises in tandem with declining oxytocin, creating a hormonal cocktail that's toxic for the brain. High cortisol levels over time can impair memory, shrink the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus, and accelerate the aging process at a cellular level. Dopamine, too, takes a nosedive with social isolation. Social interaction is one of the richest natural sources of dopamine release. When you laugh at a joke, share a story, or engage in lighthearted banter, dopamine circuits fire, making you feel good and reinforcing that behavior. But as opportunities for these interactions diminish, dopamine pathways weaken. This reduction can lead to anhedonia, the inability to experience pleasure from activities you used to enjoy. Perhaps you once found joy in reading a novel. Now, the pages feel heavy, the words dull. Maybe watching a favorite television show no longer captivates you. The suspense, the humor, the drama all fall flat. It's not simply boredom, it's a chemical change deep in your brain. But let's not reduce the story to mere shrinkage and diminished chemicals. There's also the matter of inflammation. Chronic loneliness and social isolation have been associated with increased levels of pro-inflammatory markers in the bloodstream, molecules that, when elevated, can damage blood vessels, impair metabolic function, and inflame the brain itself. Neuroinflammation is a breeding ground for neurodegenerative diseases. Inflammation in the brain can disrupt the blood-brain barrier, allowing toxins to leak into regions that are supposed to be protected. Once inside, these toxins can cause misfolded proteins to accumulate, a hallmark of diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. In other words, social isolation doesn't just quietly erode your connections, it can actively poison the very environment your neurons need to thrive. We've painted a sobering picture so far. But understanding these changes is the first step in reclaiming control. It's critical to recognize that while the brain does shrink, falter, and inflame in the absence of social engagement, it also retains a remarkable capacity for plasticity even after 70. Neuroplasticity refers to the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. This means that, with intentional effort, you can coax your brain out of the rut of isolation and back into the vibrant highways of connection. Think of neuroplasticity as a plot twist in the story of your later years. Yes, the narrative may have taken an unexpected dark turn, but there's room for heroism, resilience, and renewal. The first act of heroism involves recognizing social isolation as a health risk comparable to smoking or obesity, rather than a harmless byproduct of aging. Once you reframe isolation as a biological threat, taking steps to reconnect becomes a matter of self-preservation. You might start small, a phone call to an old friend you haven't spoken to in months, a lunch date with a neighbor you barely know, or even a simple wave and hello to someone you cross paths with each day. These seemingly trivial actions can set off a cascade of positive neural events: dopamine spikes, oxytocin surges, and cortisol dips. Over time, these micro-wins reinforce each other, helping to rebuild the brain networks that had weakened. Engaging in group activities can also be transformative. Joining a local book club, enrolling in a dance class, or volunteering at a community center not only gives you the opportunity to meet new people, but also provides mental stimulation, physical activity, and a sense of purpose. When you're discussing a book's themes, learning new steps on the dance floor, or serving others in need, you're pushing your brain to adapt, learn, and grow. The hippocampus and prefrontal cortex get the workout they desperately crave, and the resulting neural growth can translate into improved memory, sharper focus, and heightened emotional well-being. Technology offers another bridge to connection, especially when mobility or transportation becomes a challenge. Video calls can't fully replace face-to-face interaction, but they can maintain a lifeline to friends and family who live far away. Digital communities, online forums devoted to hobbies, faith, or local issues can be a source of meaningful interaction. When you type a heartfelt comment into a discussion thread and someone responds with empathy, your brain's reward circuits light up just as they would if the exchange were happening in person. Of course, it's vital to approach digital engagement mindfully. Too much screen time without balance can exacerbate feelings of loneliness rather than alleviate them. But used well, technology can be a powerful tool for keeping your brain engaged, your emotions balanced, and your sense of self intact. Let's turn for a moment to science for deeper context. In one landmark study, researchers followed a group of seniors who reported high levels of loneliness. Over a 5-year period, these individuals displayed an elevated risk of cognitive decline and dementia compared to peers who reported strong social connections. Neuroimaging revealed that the lonely seniors had accelerated atrophy in the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, as well as increased levels of inflammatory markers in cerebrospinal fluid. When the researchers intervened by offering structured social programs, regular group outings, facilitated small group discussions, and friendly visitor schemes, they observed a slowing of cognitive decline. In fact, some participants regained memory performance they had lost, suggesting the brain's plastic potential even in later life. These findings underscore the profound truth. Social engagement is not a luxury in old age. It is a powerful, medically significant intervention. Consider another study that examined the effects of friendly visiting programs in long-term care facilities. Seniors who had volunteers visit and chat with them for at least an hour each week showed improvements in mood, cognition, and overall well-being. MRI scans taken before and after 6 months of visits revealed increased activity in the prefrontal cortex during memory tasks, as well as more robust white matter integrity, indicating healthier neural highways. In practical terms, this meant participants could recall appointments more readily, felt more motivated to engage in daily activities, and exhibited fewer symptoms of depression and anxiety. Beyond structured programs, the everyday richness of social interaction also matters. Picture 2 seniors. One spends her retirement days reading quietly in her apartment. The other tends a community garden where she chats with neighbors, plays games, and shares produce. The gardener's brain receives a continuous stream of sensory, cognitive, and emotional stimuli, the texture and aroma of herbs, the problem-solving of tending plants, the camaraderie of shared labor, the friendly banter over morning coffee. These multisensory experiences engage brain regions far beyond the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, involving the sensory cortex, limbic system, and more. This richness of engagement builds resilience against cognitive decline. Meanwhile, the solitary reader may keep her mind sharp with literature, but without regular social feedback, she misses out on the full spectrum of neural stimulation that comes from interacting with others. It isn't just about preventing disease. Social engagement can enhance everyday quality of life in deeply meaningful ways. When your brain remains connected, you retain your sense of identity. You keep your stories alive, both the ones you tell others and the ones your brain narrates to itself. This sense of self is crucial. As people age, they often grapple with shifting roles, retirement, the loss of spouse or siblings, grandchildren growing up and moving away. In these transitions, social connections anchor your identity. They remind you of who you are, what you've contributed, and why you still matter. Without that anchor, it's easy to feel unmoored, adrift in a sea of what now? And who am I? Moreover, social engagement nurtures a sense of purpose. We often derive meaning from our ties to family, friends, community, and causes greater than ourselves. After 70, traditional roles, career, raising children, may have passed, leaving a vacuum. But new roles can emerge: advocate, mentor, volunteer, friend, caregiver. Perhaps you have decades of wisdom to share with younger generations, whether through storytelling, tutoring, or simply being a listening ear. These roles not only benefit others, they light fires in your own brain, stimulating the release of neurotrophic factors, chemicals that support neuron growth and survival. In essence, helping others can help your own brain flourish. When social connections falter, depression and anxiety often follow. It's not just about feeling sad or worried. The underlying biology shifts. Levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, which supports neuron growth and resilience, drop significantly in depressed and isolated older adults. Without enough BDNF, neurons are more vulnerable to stress and less capable of forming new connections. This biological environment deepens cognitive impairment and can accelerate the progression of neurodegenerative diseases. In contrast, social engagement acts as a natural antidepressant and anxiolytic, boosting BDNF levels, normalizing cortisol patterns, and stabilizing neurotransmitter systems. We've discussed the dire consequences of social isolation and the biological imperative for connection. But perhaps the most important message is that it is never too late to change course. Your brain, even after 70, retains remarkable malleability. Engaging social obstacles, mobility limitations, transportation issues, hearing loss, don't have to be roadblocks. As the days stretch into weeks and weeks into months, the absence of familiar faces becomes an ever-present backdrop to your thoughts. In those quiet hours, when you sit alone in your living room and gaze out at the world passing you by, a subtle shift begins within the intricate folds of your brain. Without the invigorating challenge of conversation, your neurons, the very cells responsible for thought, emotion, and memory, start to lose their daily workout. Just as a muscle left unused will atrophy over time, so too does the social portion of your mind when it is starved of connection. You may not notice at first. Perhaps you relish the solitude, feeling content with your own company, convinced that the conversations of the past have served their purpose. Yet, beneath the surface of this tranquility, a creeping vulnerability begins to take hold. One of the earliest changes you experience is a decline in cognitive flexibility, the mental agility that allows you to shift perspectives, entertain novel ideas, and adapt to new situations. In your younger years, every encounter with a friend or loved one would have prompted your brain to navigate rapidly between thoughts, feelings, and memories, recalling past jokes, sensing emotional cues, deciphering tone, and formulating appropriate responses. This complex ballet of neural activity engaged multiple regions of your brain simultaneously: the prefrontal cortex for decision-making, the temporal lobes for language and memory, and the limbic system for emotional processing. But when social interactions wane, these regions receive far less stimulation. Over time, the neural pathways that once crisscrossed in spectacular choreography begin to lose their luster. Tasks that were once effortless, understanding sarcasm, recalling a name, or making a witty remark, now require extra effort. You may find yourself pausing mid-sentence, searching for a word that used to pop into your mind without a hitch. Alongside this decline in mental agility, there is a more insidious shift happening in the structure of your brain. Studies of older adults who experience prolonged social isolation consistently reveal a measurable reduction in gray matter volume, particularly in regions tied to social cognition and executive function. Gray matter can be thought of as the processing power of the brain. It consists of billions of neuronal cell bodies that coordinate to execute complex tasks. When you stop socializing, certain regions, most notably the medial prefrontal cortex, which helps you understand others' intentions, and the hippocampus, which plays a critical role in memory formation, begin to shrink ever so slightly. This shrinkage does not manifest overnight. It accumulates gradually, like water wearing away stone. You might notice that recalling a cherished memory of a past gathering feels fuzzier. The vibrant details you once captured, your friends' laughter echoing against the walls, the comforting clatter of teacups, start to blur at the edges. Compounding these structural changes is a physiological shift in brain chemistry. Every meaningful conversation you have releases a cascade of neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, that regulate your mood, reinforce social bonds, and reward you for engaging with others. When you cease these interactions, levels of these feel-good chemicals begin to dwindle. At first, you might not link your changing mood to the absence of friendly banter. You might chalk it up to just getting older. But gradually, you become aware of a persistent undercurrent of unease, a subtle heaviness that settles in your chest. Days that once felt bright and full of possibility now carry a gray tint, lacking the small burst of joy you once derived from daily chit-chat or the friendly wink of a neighbor. Without the regular release of these neurochemicals, your emotional resilience dwindles. You become more prone to sadness, anxiety, and even apathy. Tasks you once found enjoyable, reading a book, tending to the garden, preparing a favorite meal, begin to feel like chores, as if the spark that once ignited your passion has been doused. Perhaps most alarming is the increased risk of cognitive decline and dementia associated with social isolation. While growing older inevitably brings an increased risk of conditions such as Alzheimer's disease, loneliness and a lack of social engagement have been identified as significant accelerants. In a well-known longitudinal study, researchers followed a group of adults over several decades and discovered that those who reported high levels of social isolation were more likely to develop dementia than their socially active peers. The theory is twofold. First, regular social interaction acts as a form of mental exercise, stimulating the brain in multimodal ways through language, emotional processing, sensory input, and problem solving. Without this stimulation, the brain's defenses against the buildup of amyloid plaques and tau tangles, hallmarks of Alzheimer's, are weakened. Second, the heightened stress associated with loneliness triggers chronic inflammation, which can damage blood vessels and neuronal tissue over time. Inflammation, often dubbed the silent killer, creeps through your body and your mind, undermining the very systems that keep your brain healthy and robust. But the neural consequences of social disconnection extend beyond cognitive decline and shrinkage of brain regions. Your sense of identity, which has been shaped in part by interactions with others, sharing stories, receiving feedback, celebrating milestones, begins to fracture. When you stop connecting with those who know your history, who share your inside jokes, who remember your quirks, you lose an important mirror that validates who you are. Your brain thrives on this social mirror. It uses it to fine-tune your self-concept, to reinforce the narratives that have guided you through life. Deprived of this external reflection, you may find yourself questioning your own value, your purpose. Memories that once seemed vivid and anchored in shared experience become isolated fragments, lacking the context that gave them life. As a result, you might catch yourself asking, "Who am I if I no longer hold the same place in someone else's story?" This existential unease places additional strain on neural circuits responsible for emotional regulation and self-awareness, leaving you vulnerable to spirals of negative thinking. Emotionally, the pull of isolation can be like quicksand. The more you sink into silence, the harder it becomes to reach out for support. Even as you recognize the toll it takes on your mind, the fear of rejection, the stigma of loneliness, or simply the inertia of routine can prevent you from breaking free. Meanwhile, your brain's reward system, designed to reinforce behaviors that ensure survival, such as eating, reproducing, and social bonding starts rewarding solitude less and less. Instead of experiencing a burst of pleasure after a friendly chat, your brain becomes accustomed to solitude. The threshold for what constitutes rewarding social interaction rises. Small attempts at re-engagement, like texting an old friend, may not produce the dopamine hit they once did, leaving you feeling deflated and more reluctant to try again. This negative feedback loop erodes not only your social network, but also the neural underpinnings that would normally encourage you to rebuild connections. As these changes accumulate, you might notice alterations in your sleep patterns as well. Social isolation often disrupts the delicate balance of circadian rhythms. When your days lack the external cues of social activity, shared morning coffee, afternoon visits, evening calls, your brain's master clock, housed in the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus, loses some of its synchronization. You might find yourself waking up late, struggling to fall asleep, or tossing and turning as thoughts of regret and loneliness swirl through your mind. Inadequate or fragmented sleep further exacerbates cognitive decline. During deep sleep, your brain performs essential housekeeping, clearing out metabolic waste, reinforcing memory consolidation, and regulating mood. Skimping on these vital processes leaves your neurons sluggish, cognition foggy, and emotional regulation impaired. It becomes a vicious cycle. Sleep suffers because you're lonely. Your brain struggles because it's sleep deprived. You feel even more isolated because your energy is depleted and your mood is low. Beyond these internal shifts, your senses themselves may begin to dull. Human interaction is multisensory. The tone of a friend's voice, the warmth of a hug, the smell of a shared meal. When these sensory experiences disappear from your daily life, the corresponding neural pathways lose stimulation. Your brain's ability to process sensory details, nuances in facial expressions, subtleties in tone, the tactile feedback of a handshake, wanes. This sensory dimming makes it harder to connect with others even when opportunities arise. You might misinterpret a bemused expression as disinterest or fail to detect the warmth in someone's eyes. These missed signals compound the social withdrawal, reinforcing the perception that nobody really wants to talk to me anymore, when in reality it's your brain's own diminished capacity to perceive nuance that lies at the root. Yet, even in the midst of these daunting changes, your brain retains a remarkable capacity for resilience. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections, doesn't vanish when you cross 70. Though it may require more deliberate effort than in your younger years, your mind can still create new pathways that counteract the effects of isolation. The key lies in understanding the mechanisms at play and taking intentional steps to reignite the social spark that fuels your brain's health. For example, simple activities such as joining a neighborhood walking group, attending a local book club, even if it's an online meeting, can serve as a lifeline for your neural networks. Each conversation you have is like a drop of water on a parched landscape. It nourishes the neural soil, allowing new shoots of connectivity to emerge. Imagine you decide to volunteer at a local community center, greeting visitors at the front desk. At first, it might feel awkward. Your small talk seems stilted, and you struggle to remember everyone's name. But as the weeks go by, your brain begins to relearn the patterns of social interaction. The same prefrontal regions that had grown quiet and atrophied start to light up again. Oxytocin flows as you offer a friendly smile to an elderly visitor, and dopamine rewards you when you receive a heartfelt thank you in return. Your hippocampus, once sluggish in forming new memories of recent events, ramps up its activity, storing details of the conversations you have, what Mrs. Patel's grandkids are doing at college, the new baby that the Smiths welcomed last month. Though this process may not reverse all the structural changes that occurred during your period of isolation, it does slow down further decline and fosters new connections. Over time, you notice that recalling names becomes easier, your mood lifts, and you sleep more soundly. Another pathway to revitalize your brain lies in embracing technology. While at first blush it might seem that screens cannot replicate the warmth of face-to-face interaction, the digital age has introduced countless ways to connect, particularly for those with mobility constraints or limited local social networks. Video calls with family members, participation in virtual discussion forums around your favorite hobbies, whether that's genealogy, knitting, gardening, or classic film, can stimulate the same neural regions as in-person gatherings. Each time you log onto a video chat and see the spark in your granddaughter's eyes, your brain responds with a burst of neurochemical light, reinforcing the circuits that process social reward. It also challenges your cognitive flexibility as you navigate the quirks of technology, muting and unmuting, adjusting camera angles, interpreting digital body language, as if you were learning a new dialect of social interaction. This mental workout helps maintain the integrity of white matter tracts, bundles of myelinated fibers that facilitate communication between brain regions, thereby preserving the speed and efficiency of neural signaling. Physical exercise, too, plays a vital role in buffering against the cognitive fallout of social disconnection. When you combine movement with social engagement, taking a friend to a dance class or joining a group exercise program, you activate a powerful synergy in your brain. Exercise alone increases blood flow to the hippocampus, promoting the growth of new neurons, a process known as neurogenesis. When you pair that with social interaction, you compound the benefits. The exhilaration of shared accomplishment, the laughter that emerges from shared exertion, and the sense of accountability that keeps you coming back each week. Together, these elements boost levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, a protein that supports neuronal growth and resilience. Higher BDNF levels are associated with better memory, improved mood, and a lower risk of neurodegenerative disease. Thus, you're not just preserving what remains of your cognitive vitality, you're actively cultivating a sturdier, more adaptable mind. Mindful practices, such as meditation and journaling, can also bolster your capacity to navigate the emotional toll of isolation. While these activities may feel solitary by nature, they sharpen your ability to tune into your internal landscape, fostering emotional self-awareness. When you understand the rising tide of your own negative thoughts, "I'm too old to make new friends," "Nobody wants to spend time with me," you can challenge these beliefs before they calcify into self-fulfilling prophecies. In meditation, for instance, you learn to observe your thoughts without judgment, recognizing loneliness as a temporary state rather than an immutable identity. This shift in perspective reduces the chronic stress response, characterized by elevated cortisol, that otherwise accelerates brain aging. Journaling, meanwhile, allows you to track subtle changes in mood, identify patterns of avoidance, and set small, actionable goals to re-engage with your community. By writing down, "Today, I will call my old college roommate," you're not only reinforcing neural pathways associated with planning and execution, you're also laying the groundwork for a reconnection that could spark a cascade of positive neurochemical events, dietary interventions should not be overlooked in the quest to nourish a socially deprived brain. Omega-3 fatty acids, found in fatty fish like salmon or in flaxseed oil, play a crucial role in maintaining neuronal membrane fluidity. When your brain cells are well lubricated by healthy fats, neurotransmitter signaling is more efficient, supporting mood regulation and cognitive performance. Antioxidant-rich foods, berries, dark leafy greens, nuts, combat oxidative stress, a destructive process that accelerates neural aging. Although nutrition alone cannot substitute for social interaction, it lays the biochemical foundation that allows your brain to respond more robustly when you re-enter the social arena. Imagine preparing a vibrant salad of spinach, blueberries, walnuts, and grilled salmon. As you nourish your body, you also bolster your brain's capacity to reforge neural connections. Of course, rebuilding a social life after 70 can be intimidating. You may carry the self-consciousness of a teenager taking awkward first steps on a high school dance floor, uncertain of where to stand, what to say, and whether you'll be accepted. Yet, the stakes are higher now. Each moment of courage, extending your hand in greeting, offering a genuine compliment, or simply smiling at a passerby, becomes a vital thread in the tapestry of your neural revival. Think of these moments as small victories in a long campaign. When you attend that community potluck and strike up a conversation with someone who, like you, is a widow or widower, you forge a new node in your social network. That node sends electrical impulses through your brain, lighting up pathways that had grown dim. With each new acquaintance, your brain's social map expands, making subsequent interactions less daunting and more rewarding. Religious or spiritual communities can be especially potent sources of social engagement for seniors. The rituals, shared beliefs, and communal activities, singing hymns, reciting prayers, volunteering for charity, activate multiple regions of the brain in synchrony. The rhythm of prayer or chant taps into the auditory cortex. The act of kneeling or standing engages the motor cortex. The emotional resonance of shared belief stimulates the limbic system. When you participate in a religious service, you experience a symphony of neural activity, each note reinforcing the harmony of social belonging. Moreover, these settings often provide an intergenerational dimension. Interacting with younger volunteers or children at a community outreach program allows you to share your lifetime of experiences, which in turn stimulates your memory and bolsters your sense of purpose. You become both a teacher and a student, passing on wisdom while absorbing fresh perspectives, an exchange that kindles neuroplasticity in both directions. Your brain recalibrates, refining your preferences and strengthening your ability to adapt. Even when a new attempt at social engagement doesn't go as planned, perhaps a conversation that fizzles after a few awkward minutes or an invitation you waited for that never arrives, those missteps still kindle neural activity. The prefrontal cortex learns to evaluate social risk. The amygdala practices tolerating discomfort, and the anterior cingulate cortex refines its ability to manage feelings of rejection. In essence, every effort, successful or not, contributes to neural resilience. Imagine that garden you've tended, now imagine tending it not just with seeds, but with deliberate care to nurture the soil itself. In isolation, that soil can become compact, crackled with self-doubt and uncertainty, making it hard for fresh seeds of connection to take root. Each time you reach out, sending a greeting card, offering to share a favorite meal, or volunteering your time, you're gently tilling the soil of your social world. You're loosening that hardened ground, allowing air and hope to seep in. Even if only a handful of your seeds sprout right away, you're laying the groundwork for a future harvest. Over time, roots grow deeper, stems grow sturdier, and the colors of vibrant relationships begin to fill the landscape of your life once more. Consider the role of creative expression as a form of social doorway. When you paint a landscape, write a short story, or craft a simple pottery bowl, you're tapping into parts of your brain that thrive on novelty and emotional expression. If you share your artwork in a local class, an online forum, or even a family gathering, you ignite conversations that go beyond small talk. People comment on colors you chose, ask about your inspiration, or reminisce about their own creative adventures. These dialogues carry a richness that extends beyond mere hello and goodbye. They engage mirror neurons, sparking empathy and connection, while also recruiting the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex to organize your thoughts and communicate your creative vision. In this way, art becomes both a personal sanctuary and a bridge to others. Music offers another potent avenue for rekindling neural vitality. Studies show that singing in a group or playing an instrument engages multiple brain areas simultaneously: auditory regions for processing sound, motor areas for coordinating movement, and limbic circuits for emotional resonance. When you join a community choir or attend a local drum circle, your brain experiences an orchestra of stimulation. The emotional high that comes from singing in harmony with others floods your system with endorphins. Those shared emotional waves reinforce connective tissue between neurons, strengthening synapses that govern everything from memory to empathy. Even if the melody stumbles at first and you momentarily lose your place, the collective effort of creating something beautiful together becomes a powerful counter to isolation. Dance, too, can become a social catalyst. You might hesitate at the idea of stepping onto a dance floor, worried your balance isn't what it used to be or that you've forgotten basic steps. But imagine a class tailored for seniors, perhaps gentle ballroom, line dancing, or adaptive chair movement. The rhythm of music, the warmth of communal movement, the laughter that bubbles when a step misfires, all of these elements combine to generate a potent neural elixir. Your cerebellum refines motor coordination, your basal ganglia learns new patterns, your visual cortex processes shifting spatial relationships, and your prefrontal cortex orchestrates decision-making about when to glide forward, step back, or spin in place. Meanwhile, as you lock eyes and smile with a dance partner, oxytocin surges, reinforcing trust and bonding. In short, dance becomes a joyful laboratory for neural regeneration. Beyond individual pursuits, consider the power of collective purpose to reignite your brain's social circuits. Many older adults discover a renewed sense of meaning by tackling community challenges, organizing a neighborhood cleanup, mentoring at-risk youth, or advocating for local green spaces. When you collaborate with others toward a shared goal, your brain's reward circuitry lights up in anticipation of collective success. Each planning meeting activates the prefrontal cortex, coordinating tasks and deadlines, the orbitofrontal cortex, evaluating risk and reward, and the posterior parietal cortex, tracking spatial logistics such as mapping out routes or venues. When the project succeeds, a litter-free park, a school garden planted, a petition delivered, your brain rewards you with dopamine surges, bolstering motivation for future collaboration. These shared victories become testimonies of your ongoing value to society, reinforcing your identity as a vital contributor rather than someone who's retired from meaningful engagement. Of course, not all solutions require stepping out of the home. Pet companionship can be a remarkable remedy for isolation. Caring for a dog, cat, bird, or small mammal provides purpose, routine, and tactile stimulation. Each gentle purr, wagging tail, or fluttering wing triggers oxytocin release, not just in you, but also in the animal, creating a mutual bond that transcends words. As you feed, groom, and play with your pet, your brain's somatosensory cortex lights up with each stroke of fur or brush of feathers. Even more, pets can serve as social ambassadors. Walking a dog often leads to casual chats with passersby, and cat ownership can spark conversations at community events or pet-focused online groups. Through your pet, you find an inexplicable doorway to human connection. Technology, when embraced mindfully, also offers a path forward. If mobility or health challenges limit your ability to leave home, virtual reality (VR) platforms can create immersive social experiences. VR senior centers now exist where you can attend a yoga class, explore a virtual museum with others, or join a game of digital bingo in real time. By donning a headset, you transport your brain to environments rich with sensory stimuli, visual details, ambient sounds, even haptic feedback, simulating face-to-face interaction. Although VR can't fully replace in-person engagement, it does activate many of the same neural circuits. Sensory cortices process lifelike imagery, mirror neurons respond to avatars' gestures, and limbic regions respond to the emotional valence of shared experiences. The key is balance. Use VR to augment, not replace, real-world connections, ensuring that your brain continues to reap the unique benefits of both tangible and virtual socialization. Language learning presents another fertile avenue. Picking up a new language after 70 might sound daunting, but even basic conversational skills can be profoundly beneficial. When you attend a Spanish conversational circle or a Mandarin calligraphy class, you're asking your brain to rewire complex networks. Broca's area works double time to produce unfamiliar sounds. Wernicke's area strives to decode new vocabulary. The angular gyrus juggles symbol recognition, and the prefrontal cortex strategizes how to string sentences together. Each successful utterance, each smile of comprehension from your conversation partner releases dopamine, rewarding your brain for venturing outside its comfort zone. And because language is inherently social, you're simultaneously forging bonds with classmates who share your struggle and triumphs, transforming grammar drills into shared laughter over mispronunciations. Over time, your cognitive flexibility improves, offering collateral benefits for memory, problem-solving, and even cultural empathy.